Isn't that so much better than my cowbell? All right. Call to order the July 30th meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm President Doug Saltzgaver. It's great to be back here at the Wakanda Club, isn't it? We have those of you here in person, and we have hopefully several thousand watching our live streaming. Welcome to all of you, and thanks to Invictus Media for running our live streaming service. We're making history today, the first live streaming on YouTube for the Rotary Club of Des Moines, number 27. On this day in 1619, the first legislative assembly in America convenes in the New World. It was in Jamestown. And Neil Smith was elected the following year. Neil, I hope you're safe and healthy and watching this from home. I'm not wearing a mask here at the podium so you can hear me more clearly, and I'm safely distanced from all of you. We will be sanitizing the microphone between speakers in case you're concerned. I will now ask past President Sean Mullen to share a moment of inspiration, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test. Almost forgot my duty. That sounds nice on live streaming.
Thank you, President Doug. Friends, today we mark the passing of the Conscience of Congress, Representative John Lewis, and our moment of inspiration comes from one of his writings. He says, "You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Study the path of others to make your way easier and more abundant. Lean toward the whispers of your own heart. Discover the universal truth and follow its dictates. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. Choose confrontation wisely, but when you do, it is your time. And don't be afraid to stand up, and speak out against injustice. And if you follow your truth down the road to peace and the affirmation of love, if you shine like a beacon for all to see, then the poetry of all the great dreamers and philosophers is yours to manifest in a nation, a world community, and a beloved community that is finally at peace with itself." Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test of Rotarians and all that we do, think, and say: is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you for your time, and now you can see how well I sanitize the microphone. Oh, that sounds so good. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, past President Sean. Now is the time we normally meet and greet our fellow Rotarians, but since we're somewhat limited on what we should be doing, we'll just ask everybody to wave at each other today. Hopefully the people live streaming can see some of that. We have two birthdays today. Neither one of them are here, but hopefully they're watching our live stream. Happy birthday wishes go out to Gene Shelton and Susan Voss. I hope you're partying like it's 1999. For those of you asking about, where's my Rotary bill? Where is it for this new quarter? And if you aren't asking, you should be asking. Well, they've not been sent out yet. The board is looking at a new dues plan to be more fair to all concerned. There'll be more information shared with you in August about this plan. We thank you for your patience. So hold on to your money for now and let it continue to earn that high interest rate. At Iowa State Bank? Okay. Denise Essman will now introduce our keynote speaker. But before that, I want to talk about our new procedure for questions and answers. If our speaker has time for a few questions today, there's a microphone stand over by Kitty in the hallway. We'd ask that you please line up for that and space yourselves 6 feet apart for social distancing. And our Sergeant at Arms, Kevin Kassir, will be enforcing that with the Rotary taser. Kitty will sanitize the mic between questions. Also, please do not shout out a question from your seat. We want everyone that's our friends that are on live streaming to be able to hear the question, and they can only do that if you're at the microphone. And again, Kevin has the taser. So with that, Denise? It's going to take a while to remember. No pressure. I'm going to grab about 6 of these at one time. Oh, almost knocked the clock.
Thank you, President Doug. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine, Joe LeValley, today. Joe said his life is filled with outrageous good fortune, and I'm going to tell you why. He's from Dayton, Iowa. He got his bachelor's degree in journalism from Drake University, his MBA from the University of Iowa. From there, he went to, he was a reporter and photographer covering crime and criminal issues. He did breaking news, feature stories, and for about 7 years, that was his life. He won several national awards. He went to, after that, he changed gears and went to healthcare. That seems unlikely, but he's going to tell us about that. Mercy One in North Iowa, which is in Mason City. And there he was in communications and won several national excellence awards for healthcare communications. Not surprisingly, he was promoted to come to Des Moines Mercy One and worked there for 30 years, working his way up to be senior vice president in their whole system statewide. He retired in 2018, but he's hardly retired. In January of 2019, he actually published his first book, Bearing the Lead, which he's brought, and he'll be talking about that. He has a second book that's coming out in just a few weeks or months. He's written 4 books, and he's working on his 5th. In addition to that, he's a guitar player and a composer, and he's written 40 songs, and he was inducted into the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He also does business management, consulting, strategic planning was a lot of what he did at Mercy One, so he also consults in that, government relations. He lives on an acreage in Dallas County with his wife. He has 6 kids and 2 grandchildren. And I think you'll agree that it has been outrageous good fortune. So would you please join me in welcoming Joe LeValley, our speaker. not one to follow instructions here.
Well, thank you, Denise. That was great. You made me sound a lot more interesting than I am. I really appreciate the applause as I begin because I so rarely hear it when I'm finished. I want to begin today by telling you that I have an imaginary friend. And it seems like an odd thing to confess to business leaders, but that's the facts. Tony Harrington has lived in my head for 35 years. And I want to tell you today a little bit about how he came to be and why, and how he has helped me to become an author of mystery thriller novels. As Denise said, I worked for 7 years as a writer and photographer for daily newspapers in Iowa. Most of that time was in Mason City. And I've always loved to write, and I loved my job as a reporter. I had many exciting and interesting and sometimes frightening experiences. I had the man with proven mental illness who threatened to kill me. I had the late night telephone call with an anonymous tip from an insider at the police department about a crime that was being covered up. I was riding with the state trooper when they caught the man who kidnapped and raped a young woman. So obviously, a very interesting, exciting job. I also wrote a lot of feature stories. One example is the finding of Buddy Holly's glasses. Sheriff Jerry Allen called me in the newsroom one day and said, "Grab your camera and come over." So I did, of course. And he was sitting at his desk with a cardboard box filled with the personal effects from the Buddy Holly plane crash. Now, this was 20 or 25 years after the plane crash. And so I took a picture of Sheriff Allen holding Buddy Holly's famous glasses. It's the only story and photograph I ever did that made the International Associated Press wire. The Des Moines Register still runs that photo from time to time on the anniversary of the death or the crash or Buddy Holly's birth or something. They credit it as a Des Moines Register file photo, which irks me no end, but trust me, it's my photograph. The story I like to tell students when I'm talking to college students, which I do sometimes, is the example of, this is an actual, absolutely true story. I covered the Sandy Frank murder trial one morning. The jury came in with a guilty verdict at about 11 in the morning. I went back to the newsroom and wrote that story. And then after lunch, I got in my car and went across town to Dave Friedley's house, where I got in his hot air balloon to write a feature story about ballooning. And I say to students, and I would say to you, how many careers are there where you can be in a murder trial in the morning and a hot air balloon in the afternoon and get paid for both? Not paid very much, but paid nonetheless. So my primary beat when I was a reporter was police and courts. I spent a lot of time riding in cop cars and hanging out with detectives, and I spent a lot of time sitting in courtrooms. I used to tell the attorneys in North Iowa, including Erica's dad, that I had more courtroom experience than any one of them, and I'm pretty sure that was true, at least for most of them. In my time covering police and courts, I covered 8 murders, 2 of which were double homicides, 2 attempted murders, the kidnapping I mentioned, a couple of embezzlements, et cetera, et cetera. I always laugh and say I make Mason City sound like a terrible place. Trust me, it's not. It's a lovely place. But in any case, because of my coverage of those crimes, I spent a lot of time sitting in courtrooms. And one of the things I learned, well, first of all, I was fascinated by the strategies and tactics used by attorneys. I was fascinated by the law. But I also was saddened that I learned, in my humble opinion, that justice isn't always done in the courtroom. We try hard to get there, but we just don't always get there. 3 reasons for that sort of came to mind as I was preparing my talk. One is that juries have prejudices. All human beings have prejudices. And I think most Iowa juries are comprised of good people who try to set those aside, but it's pretty tough. At least subconsciously, those things come into play. And I'm not talking about overt things like race, for example, but I mean more subtle things, like when the judge admonishes a jury to consider the defendant innocent until proven guilty. I think that's hard for Iowans to do. We have a lot of faith in our police and our justice system in Iowa, and so we have a tendency, at least again subconsciously, to think if that guy is on trial, he's been arrested and made it all the way to the trial, he must have done it. Secondly, the quality of attorneys varies greatly. And I'm sure you have attorneys in your club, and I don't want to offend anybody, but like any profession, there's attorneys who are great and there's attorneys who are not so great. I saw attorneys at work who really amazed me. They could make a jury get up and dance. And I have to tell you, I saw some attorneys that you found yourself wondering how they got out of high school, let alone law school. And it makes a difference. Juries want the attorney that they really like and admire to be successful, and they have to overcome that. So thirdly, and the one most relevant to me as a reporter, is the fact that I often, in covering a criminal trial, knew more of the facts about the case than the jury was allowed to know. And it always bothered me when the jury was headed off to the jury room to deliberate, and I was sitting there with more information than they had, and they had to decide the fate of somebody, and obviously in the case of murder, sometimes in a person's entire life. There's reasons for that. There's rules of evidence and procedural things that exist to protect both the defendant and the prosecution. But nevertheless, it made me feel badly when that happened. And here's the most overt example of it. Hector Luna stabbed his girlfriend 56 times with a butcher knife and served 18 months in jail. And you wonder, how could that happen in Iowa, where we're good at this? And the fact is, what I just said, the jury didn't have all the information it needed to make the right decision in that case. So the fact that I found myself sitting in trials and not always convinced justice was being done is what actually led to my career as a novelist. I was sitting in a murder trial one day and found myself thinking about the fictional aspect. So there's this guy on trial, all this evidence is piled up against him. Pretty clearly he did it. But what if he didn't? Who might have really done it? If that guy on trial is innocent, who's guilty? And how did they manage to amass all this evidence against him? And why? What was the reason for that? And I thought to myself at the time, that's a pretty cool idea for a novel. So fast forward a couple years, as Denise said, I left the newspaper world and went to work for Mercy in North Iowa as a communications marketing guy. And I was newly married. I had my brand new Apple IIe computer, give you an idea how old I am. And I sat down and started writing a novel based on that idea. The protagonist, the main character, Tony Harrington, 35 years ago, sat down, started writing about Tony Harrington. I wrote the actual murder scene. I wrote the chapters that introduced the fictional town of Orney and Tony Harrington and his friends and coworkers and girlfriend. And then after 6 chapters were done, life came along. Jane and I had 6 kids, not all at once, thank goodness. I went back to grad school and got my master's. I got promoted a couple times. I followed Dave Vallinga down to Des Moines to a similar but much bigger job at Mercy in Des Moines. And so for 25 years, the book mostly sat in the drawer. But Tony Harrington never left my head. I thought about that story, those characters, all the time. I would lie in bed at night before I fell asleep. I would find myself thinking about plot points, twists, what action might be included that would make the book exciting and interesting. And then, of course, pondering this question about who would have really done it and why would they have framed this innocent guy. So 2 things happened after 25 years. One is I thought of the answer to that question. I thought of what I thought was the cool plot twist that sort of formed the foundation for that story. And I read a lot. It was a turn of events that I'd never read in another novel. So I thought it might be unique, and it's a pretty cool idea. So I got excited about revisiting the book for real. And then shortly after that, I went to lunch with a group of Mercy executives. And one of my friends on the team said to our chief nurse, "Did you know Joe's writing a novel?" And our chief nurse said, and if you knew her, this wouldn't surprise you, exact quote, "I don't want to hear about his stupid novel. He's had the same 6 chapters done for 25 years. So I went home that night and told Jane I was going to finish the book. And she was surprised, needless to say. She hadn't heard anything about it in a long time. But I told her I just want it to be done. I didn't have any intent to publish it. I had no delusions about being a rich and famous author. I just wanted it to be done. I wanted my kids to be able to say, my dad wrote a novel, rather than having to say, my dad always talked about writing a novel. So I vowed I was going to write something on the book every single day until it was done. This was in October, about 4 years ago. And, you know, I'm still working my job at Mercy, and I'm still have 6 kids. But I said, no matter what, even if it's a 12-hour day, I'm going to find time to write at least 1 sentence, something on the book every day. So I did that. The only day I missed was Christmas Day, and in January it was finished. Took about 4.5 months. The book was done. So then a whole bunch of things happened we don't have time to talk about today, but 2 of them I'll mention. One is 2 published authors whose work I greatly admire agreed to read my book and gave me great feedback. And so it sent me back to the computer to write version 2 with some great suggestions and modifications based on really good input. And then, secondly, I retired from Mercy a little over 2 years ago. I was 65. I stepped down. I know I look 40, but I'm 67 now. And so now I'm retired, and I said to Jane, well, now I've got time. Maybe I should try to do something with the book. So I went looking for a literary agent and got rejected a lot of times. And on the advice of one of my author friends, I stopped looking for an agent and went looking for a publisher. And I found Book Press Publishing here in Des Moines, and they read the book and liked it. And we sat down and negotiated a deal. And here it is. For those of you who can see, this is Burying the Lead. The title is a newspaper expression. Some of you have probably heard it. The newsroom spells lead, L-E-D-E, to distinguish it from the lead that they used to use in linotype machines. But in any case, burying the lead means when the important facts of a story are buried down in the body of the story instead of at the top where they belong. And I thought it was a cool idea for a murder mystery because what's happening on the surface with this trial is not the truth. The real important facts are hidden below the surface. So Burying the Lead came out. Hardcovers were available in December of 18, and it was officially published in early 2019. And if you don't mind me saying so, it's been extremely well received. I not only mention that to feed my ego, but think of the alternative. After 30 years, if it had not been well received, I would have been suicidal. But the reality is it's won 2 awards. It's had nearly unanimous 5-star ratings on all the services that do that. And all the professional reviewers have given it positive reviews, including Publishers Weekly, which is a very rare honor. I've now sold books in 36 states. It's in its 2nd printing. And I was about to say I couldn't be happier. I guess I could be happier if I sold some more, but I'm really excited to tell you that the audiobook now will be out in about 3 weeks. It's read by David H. Lawrence, who is a Hollywood actor. If you look him up, he's got something like 200 movie and TV credits to his name. And I'm really excited about that. So that's Burying the Lead. And you'd think, okay, Joe finished it. It's published. What happened is that I didn't want Tony Harrington to go away. I don't think Tony Harrington wanted to go away. And so I decided, well, I'm still retired. I still have time. Maybe I should write a 2nd novel. So I went looking for a topic, and I wanted a big subject. For those who haven't read the book, I don't want to give too much away, but the book involves Tony gets sideways with some pretty powerful people beyond Orkney, Iowa. And so I didn't think the 2nd book could just be like a cozy, what they call a cozy mystery that all happens in the parlor or something. And so I went looking for a big topic, and I chose human trafficking. And I thought, you know, it's an important topic. People need to know more about it. It's a big topic, and it involves all kinds of social, legal, psychological issues that it's ripe for an author's exploration. I have to tell you, in doing the research and writing the book, there were times I wished I had chosen a different topic. Human trafficking is an incredibly dark, horrific world. But I wrote it, and in it, Tony Harrington and his colleagues get on the trail of a ring of human traffickers in the Midwest, and they go after them not only to bring the bad guys to justice, but to rescue a group of girls who are being held against their will and abused. I think it's a reasonably good story. I'm excited about it. This is what it looks like. This is a print shop version, and the hard copies are supposed to be here tomorrow. I'm pretty sure I've been lied to, and I probably won't have these until the end of the month. They say the pandemic has slowed things down, but it's called Cry from an Unknown Grave. And that's a Longfellow quote. If you didn't know, Longfellow wrote a series of poems about slavery, and this comes from one of those poems. And if you know anything about human trafficking, it is slavery, plain and simple. So again, I don't know if I'm a good writer, but I think I'm pretty good at titles. So that's coming out hopefully by the end of August. And then it turns out that being self-quarantined is not particularly troublesome for a guy who wants to lock himself in his home office and write all day. So as Denise said, I've written 2 more books. In the 3rd one, it's called The Third Side of Murder, and Tony Harrington follows his Italian mother back to Italy for a family funeral, realizes his young cousin was murdered, identifies the killer, and follows the killer back to New York City. So the entire 3rd novel takes place in New York and Italy. As you can imagine, great fun to write, a little bit challenging, particularly the scenes in Italy. I've been to Italy, which helps, but it certainly presents its challenges. And the 4th novel is called Performing Murder, where Hollywood comes to Iowa to film a movie on location, and one of the famous actresses gets killed. Someone close to Tony gets accused of the crime, And again, Tony has to go looking for the real killer. So the bottom line to all this is, one, I'm having the time of my life, and I love to share that. For those of you looking at retirement, I think the message is there's life after retirement. I feel very blessed, very fortunate to have found something that I find so interesting and exciting and fun to fill my time, and I hope you all have similar success when you get to be as old as I am. So with that, I'll be quiet, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. I don't know if she's playing mic tender or if she has a question. Okay, great.
I actually have two questions. The first one is, if your books were made into a movie, who would play the characters? And the second one is, I have a lot of friends that are writers and write books and that kind of thing. So what would your advice be as an accomplished writer to those that like to write and maybe aspire to that?
Okay, well, first question first. My kids have made a game of this, of talking about and debating who should play who in the movie. My younger brother says he should be Tony Harrington. Tony's like 27 in the book, and my younger brother's 60, so that's not going to happen. I don't have a strong opinion, and I'm not very good with Hollywood names, so I can picture people that I can't even probably come up with their names. But I do know one thing. I would love for Ron Howard to play Tony's boss. I happen to have interviewed Ron Howard a long time ago, and I just think he'd be ideal as the editor of the newspaper. And of course, if I could get him to play the role, he might direct the movie, which would make it a huge success. But it's just a game. You know, I don't have any illusions. I know one thing, getting a book published is hard. Getting a movie made is 100 times harder. So I don't even fantasize about that. If Hollywood calls, great, but I'm not holding my breath. I did have the great fortune, thanks to DMAC, of meeting Diane Feinstein, Diane Feinberg, who is the director of photography at Pixar. She loves my books. She's written positive blurbs about both of them. And I tease her that I'm going to have Woody play Tony Harrington in the movie. The second question, I actually have a whole talk I do on advice for writers. One, of course, is work at it every day. That's how I got my first book done, was when I finally made that vow. But another tip I love to give that's less common is don't verbalize your stories. When I had the cool idea for the plot twist for Burying the Lead, I forced myself to never tell anybody. I had this great idea, and I didn't tell anybody, because if you keep it inside, it makes you all the more likely to sit down and get it onto paper. You're so desperate to tell that good story. I do a lot of author talks where people come up to me afterwards and they say, I'm writing a book and I want to tell you all about it. And I'm like, no. Don't tell anybody your story, because the less you talk about it, the more likely you are to sit down and write it.
Hey, Joe, I'm reading some emails that people have sent in from our live stream audience, so thanks for those of you who are tuning in. One of them is, well, actually it's from Doug.
Well, you know, it's a lot of work to get up and walk all the way over there.
Is the book available as an ebook?
Yes, both books are available in all those formats. Ebook, yes, from Amazon or whomever you buy your ebooks from. And Baker and Taylor has agreed to carry the books. They're one of the largest distributors of books in the world. And so now my books are available from any bookstore anywhere in North America, anywhere in Europe. Any bookstore, they are part of the Baker and Taylor distribution network, and they can order the book if you don't find it on the shelf. It's available from barnesandnoble.com, etc. But yes, short answer is it is an ebook. I sell about, I don't know, 50 ebooks a month or something like that. The advantage to the hardcover is that you get a really nice inscription from the author so that you can put on your shelf. So, by the way, for those of you in the room, I left my card that has the website on it, and all this information is on the website, so feel free to look for that. Next question.
Yeah, just a comment from Kent Sovereign, who just said, applause, what a fun presentation, and that Joe and Kent have known each other since the Mason City days, so he wanted to send his regards.
Yeah, hi Kent. Kent and I'm surprised that he would admit to being on the live stream, because Kent and I were bachelors in Mason City at the same time. And so those of you who need stories about Kent, I would be happy to fill you in on some juicy ones. Any other questions?
Joe, thank you for coming. Enjoy it. And I'm going to have to go out and buy the book. I haven't done that yet, so I will certainly do that. But
I just happen to have a few with me.
Okay. But it was mentioned briefly, and it's on your card. Could you elaborate a little bit on the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was honestly the greatest honor of my life. And the Iowa Rock and Roll Music Association has been around a long time, 20-some years. Iowa was the first state in the nation to have a full-time Rock and Roll Music Association. It's based up in Arnold's Park, because that's where the founder is from. There's a permanent museum there designed by the people who designed the museum in Cleveland. It's tiny, don't misunderstand. It's very small, but it is beautiful, and you really should see it. But induction weekend is a fantastic experience. 2,000 people, and they do formal induction at the Sammy Center, which is a beautiful tiered theater setting in North Iowa. And then they do a concert at the Roof Garden. And so it was an opportunity. The band that got inducted into the Hall of Fame was from my college days, a band called Morning Glory. When I was a full-time college student, I had a year where I played 269 nights, live gigs, in 1 year. To which a lot of people respond, you weren't a full-time college student, which is probably more true than I want to admit. But we had a band that was very successful back in the 70s, and that's the band that was inducted. Inductions are a result of people nominating you, and then you go through a regional process where a group of people have to review all the nominations and make recommendations, and the board of directors of the association makes the final selection. And about 8 bands get inducted each year. And for me, 2 really cool things about it. Thank you so much for asking. One is a group that I played with 40 years ago had a chance to get back together, all 4 of the original guys, and play 20 minutes of the induction concert, which is what you're allowed. Each band gets 20 minutes. And it was such a joy to be back on stage with these guys that you practically lived with for years. But secondly, and for me even more importantly, my children were at the front of the stage watching their dad perform to 2,000 cheering fans. And for 20 minutes, I was this much cooler than they thought I was. It was honestly the greatest joy of my life to have that opportunity. So thanks for asking. And please support the Iowa Rock and Roll Music Association. It's iowarockandroll.com, letter N, not the word and, iowarockandroll.com. They could use your support, especially in this crazy time. Sir.
Thank you for the presentation. How did Mr. Harrington play in your mind in the 25 years in how you approached your professional life?
Yeah, that's it. I'm not exactly sure I understand the question, but let me tell you this about Tony. He's a nice guy, which isn't normal in thriller novels. If you think about it, there's really, not always, certainly there's a range in everything, but two of the most common types of protagonists in novels, one is the superhero, Jason Bourne, Jack Reacher, James Bond. These guys who can do no wrong, if they're on the case, you know it's going to be fine because they're faster, better, stronger, smarter than everybody. And then the other type of very common protagonist is the guy who's completely down on his luck. He's alcoholic, he smokes all the time, he's twice divorced, he fights with his boss. Harry Bosch, Joe Nesbo's character, Harry Hole. And I couldn't see myself writing either type of person. I don't know enough about how to be a superhero, certainly. And I don't enjoy that much reading about people who are struggling with their every aspect of their life. So I decided to make Tony Harrington a nice Iowa guy. But in doing that, I knew that bad things had to happen in the book, or else it just becomes a cartoon. There's no gravitas at all. And so over the 25 years, Tony really never changed very much. I was so determined. By the way, people ask me, maybe that's the next question, I don't know, but people ask me how much of Tony is me, single young newspaper reporter. And I say, well, let's see, he's tall, slender, dark, handsome, smart, and brave. So yeah, I'm pretty much a clone of me. But no, in all seriousness, there are little traits, day-to-day traits that come from me. Like, he doesn't drink very much. He likes diet soda. And he curses, but he hates himself for it. So there's little things like that come out of me. But for the most part, I genuinely tried to create a fictional character who was just a basically nice guy. Now, I'll tell you, over the course of the 4 novels, his character has grown darker, not in any serious, horrible way, but in book 2, he buys a gun, which you would never imagine after reading book 1. And he does so very reluctantly, but the character has evolved over the books, which I think is important, and I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to do that to some extent. So, did I answer your question or come anywhere close? Oh, I see. Well, so the question was, did Tony talk to me as it related to my professional career? And there the answer is no. So I said I have an imaginary friend, but fortunately, I don't have voices in my head. And Tony was always relegated to the fictional world of Orny, Iowa, and the novels, and I always thought of him in that context. I might have found myself on occasion wishing I was more like him, but other than that, didn't really cross paths with the real world. I've never had that question before. That's a great question.
I wanted to back up to the music part of your life, and you've written 40 songs, and I was wondering if we would recognize any of the songs, or have they been published? Where are they? What are they about? Are they rock and roll, obviously, probably? But
have you heard I Want to Hold Your Hand? That's a joke. No, you probably wouldn't. 2 things about it. You can go to YouTube. If you type my name into the search bar in YouTube, 2 things will come up. My novel, there's a publisher has put a 90-second clip out there about my first book, and one of my songs, the theme of which is We're a Song God is Singing. It's written as a tribute to the people at Mercy. And I'm very proud of that song, and that's why I keep it out on YouTube, because I want nurses and doctors and others to have a chance to listen to it if they find some comfort in it. But in any case, 18 of the 40 songs were written for Mercy events. I had a boss who appreciated how right-brained I am. Thank goodness, because I don't have a single brain cell on the left side. I don't know how to multiply fractions. So I had a boss, Dave Valinga, who really appreciated having someone on his team who was right-brained, who was creative and interested in experimenting with weird things. So it so happened when Dave turned 40, I wrote a song about him, and we did it at a Mercy event for his birthday. So then, of course, when John McGregor retired, a surgeon in Mason City, Dave came to me and said, I want you to write a song for John McGregor's retirement party. So I did, and then he came to me and said, I want you to write a song for Mike Ellington's going away party, and I did. And that one, I ended up writing 18 songs for Dave over the years, most recently just 3 years ago, maybe. So that's 18. The other 22 are mostly ballads. You know, I'm a drummer on the band. I play drums. So my guitar playing is not particularly proficient enough to compose music, but they're mostly ballads. There's one hard rock tune I've written. There's actually one hard country tune I've written. I love creating, and I feel very, very fortunate to be where I am. I can see I'm out of time. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate your interest.
All right, I should be getting good at Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for your confidence. All right. Thank you, Joe, for spending time with us today. That was very, very interesting, and glad I got a little time with him before the meeting. He's truly a very interesting guy. He's had a lot of good life experiences. Today we're donating the book by a competing author, sorry. We've Got a Job, the 1963 Birmingham Children's March to the Downtown School Library in your honor. And it was written a little bit in there. Thanks for everyone being with us here in person today or by live streaming. Do we have a final count on how many live streaming? Did we hit 1 million? Almost? Close. Eight people. No, I don't. For those of you that are live streaming or will see us here in the future, you can go to YouTube and watch it later if you'd like. We do have upcoming speakers. Hopefully we'll be here at the Wakanda Club again. Next week is Alan Hoover III, the great-grandson of Herbert Hoover. Topic is Reimagining the Future, the Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. And apparently it is not about the history of the Hoover vacuum. I was corrected on that by Ski Wooten after last meeting. Thank you, Ski. August 13th, we have Tracy and Michael Watt, who are former and retired FBI agents. So of course their topic of discussion is going to be Central Iowa organic fertilizer, because they are now worm farmers. Everyone, I think, can see the link between FBI and being a worm farmer. On August 20th, we have Renee Hardman, CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters. Also, we continue on. Remember, we are limiting our attendance to no more than 30 Rotarians, and I think we were at 31 today here in person. You must RSVP by Monday at 10 for that week's Rotary meeting. There will be an email sent out today with a link to register, and there was a link in last Tuesday's bulletin for next week's meeting. We sincerely appreciate your cooperation with our new procedures for our meetings. And there's always the live stream option, as I mentioned, where you can watch safely from your home or office, which for some of you may be the same thing. Thank you for being with us today and for being part of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. We are adjourned.